Okay, so I have the live stream going. So unless you hear otherwise, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brandy. All right, so I'll call the meeting of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee to order. I'd like to acknowledge that many of us are gathered on the territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And I like to take the time as a settler myself on this land and doing this work on sustainability to acknowledge the role that Indigenous peoples and nations have had as stewards of this land since time immemorial. And our dedication, recognize our dedication to working in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all Indigenous peoples and nations going forward. Welcome everyone. We do have some new faces to this meeting today. So I'd like to do a quick round of introductions. I'm Keenan Illen. I'm the Ward 2 Councillor for the City of Barrie, Chair of the committee, and happy to see all of you here today. And I'll pass it off to John, our Vice Chair, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Keenan. John Northcote, resident of Barrie. I grew up in Barrie. I'm a transportation engineer by trade and passionate about active transportation and sustainability. And so I will pass it off to Sherry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sherry Diaz, public health nurse with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. I've been working on active transportation in partnership with the City of Barrie for many, many years and enjoy being part of this committee. I'll pass it off to Kelly.
Good morning, I'm Kelly. I am a citizen of this beautiful City of Barrie, and I enjoy active transportation and working on sustainability within the city and promoting all of the above. I'm going to pass it on to Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Jeff Sharp, Supervisor of Traffic Operations and Community Safety with the City of Barrie. So my portfolio includes everything to do with signs, pavement markings, pedestrian safety, that sort of realm within the City of Barrie. And I'll pass it off to Justin.
Hi, good morning. Justin MacDonald, City of Barrie Transportation Planning Department. I deal with development, AT kind of planning and implementation. And I will pass it off to Erin Donnelly.
Thanks, Justin. I'm Erin with the city's special events team. So we work with the city's special events, but also on permitting all of the events that happen in our community, as well as the Business and Parks program and some filming as well. And I'll pass it off to Laurel.
I'm Laurel. I'm a member of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. I've been a resident of Barrie for about 5 years. I'm an environmental engineer by trade, but I've only been part of this committee, I think, since November or so. But I've been enjoying it so far, and I will pass it off to Anne Marie.
Thanks, Laurel. Good morning, everyone. Ward 3 City Councillor and just enthusiast of everything that this committee has tabled. So big supporter of the mandate and hoping to share an announcement today later in the agenda. So I'll pass it off to, I'm looking around the room, and Kevin Bradley.
I'm muted. Thank you, Councillor Congo. Kevin Bradley, Manager of Parks Planning, 22 years with the city as of last Tuesday, in about 7 different positions. But my new everything that's strategic planning, development approvals, policy, design and construction of parks and open space and trails. And I will turn it over to someone who I think is new to this committee, Caitlin Roger.
Yes, hi everyone. Caitlin Roger. I am the new climate change coordinator for the City of Barrie. We're working on, we're working on taking everything to net zero. So with the community climate change plan and the corporate climate change plan. So excited to be here and meeting everyone today. Thanks.
I guess Kevin Rankin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Kevin Rankin. I'm the manager of Parks and Forestry Operations. So we do all the maintenance operations for parks, trees, horticulture, floral displays, waterfront, etc. And I'm just a resource here on the committee, or not on the committee, but for the committee to answer questions. And I'll pass it on to Andy Pellin. I haven't heard her yet.
Hi, everyone. Andy Pellin. I'm Executive Director of Living Green Barrie. We're the local environmental charity. And Living Green, if you haven't heard of us, we've been around for 31 years doing different things in the city of Barrie. And we have some big ambitions this year to try to grow our organization. And being part of this committee is a big part of that. So I'm excited about that. And I will pass it on to Adam McMullen.
Good morning, Adam McMullen. I'm the manager of energy, and my, I guess my mandate is related to corporate emissions and energy management, and also community greenhouse gas emission reduction, and as well. Good to be here.
Thanks, Adam. We've all met our wonderful clerk, supports our work on this meeting, Brandy Thompson. Thank you so much, Brandy, for all the work that you do. That's everyone, right? I think we got everyone. Okay. So a few quick notes on the agenda. So if the committee is okay, the yield signs item, we're going to move that up to the top of the agenda just because Jeff Sharp does have to leave for another meeting, and I think we'll get a quick update on that conversation about yield signs from him. Another note, to talk about the greenhouse gas reduction plan work. We're going to talk about that under the transition document item, since it's going to be a key piece for the next term. And I've got some, I've got a little slideshow about the legacy document and the transition items for that, so we can have that conversation then. And then I did hear that Anne-Marie has an announcement, so we will try to leave time at the end for that as well. Okay, so let's get started. So Jeff, you can take it away with the conversation on yield signs. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yeah, so I'd just like to mention or talk about yield signs, and I think specific to Pine Drive neighborhood. Yield signs aren't that common throughout the city. We currently have about 40 locations where we control the right of way with a yield sign, and I believe there's 6 of them just within Pine Drive neighborhood itself. We are looking to bring a staff report to council, probably the latter end of 2022, with justification around yield signs are typically something that, you know, we don't normally see at controlled intersections. We find that motorists tend to pay more attention to vehicles when they're under the control of a yield sign, and less attention to our vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists. So that's obviously a big disadvantage for us, or the motoring public and pedestrians themselves. Stop signs are more conducive to environments where we want pedestrians and cyclists to be, you know, the primary focus for the motorists. The vehicle stops, they have an opportunity to take in the environment, see those slower moving cyclists and pedestrians, and then can proceed. Also, some of our intersections have sightline restrictions, not necessarily where they're below standard, but where there's more conflicts for the motorists, so they have an opportunity to kind of convey the land and just have an ability to see those vulnerable road users. So that's essentially the justification we'll be bringing forward to council at the end of 2022, and we'll be looking to change all of our yield signs throughout the city. Right now we're sitting, I believe it's around 40, approximately 40 locations. So we think it will be, it's definitely going to be a positive move for our cyclists and pedestrians, and all road users for that matter.
All right, thank you, Jeff. That's very helpful information. It makes a lot of sense around drivers, you know, not necessarily paying attention to vulnerable road users. I've definitely seen that from experience, for sure, as both a driver and a pedestrian. So
yeah, it forces the motors to come to a complete stop, right? As opposed to, you know, people tend to, like I said, when they're under a control of a yield sign, they're basically looking for large vehicles, and everybody else is second fiddle. So.
Mm-hmm. Now I know it was Eric who actually brought this forward. Unfortunately, he's not here today, so hopefully he can follow up after the meeting, watch the recording, and see if he has any additional questions. But do any members of the committee have any questions or comments on yield signs in general? Kelly, go ahead.
Great, thanks, Jeff. That's great information. Do you have, or does the city collect data now on any of the yield sign incidents or stop sign incidents? Is there a baseline that we have if we're changing the yield signs to stop signs, and what measurement would we have for that?
So we collect all of our collision data that we get from Barrie Police. So any motor vehicle collision throughout the city, being it with a cyclist, pedestrian, or just vehicles themselves, we have the ability to query our database. So yes, we do have that data if we chose to delve into it, for sure.
Okay, is that something that you use as you move forward, or?
We wouldn't necessarily use it to justify the switching from a yield to a stop sign, because I think we have enough just based on safety and the vulnerable road user and the purpose of the two and the difference of how a motorist behaves at an intersection. We have done a bit of analysis at some of our busier streets, like Diamonds and John Street has a yield sign, and we have in the past gone in and looked at collision data based on the yield sign, and I believe there was 3 collisions where the side street vehicle failed to yield right of way to that vehicle on the major street. So while we have the ability to query all of the locations, I'm not sure that we would necessarily bring it into the staff report.
Right.
It's something we could look at, but at this point, I don't know if it's data we would bring into the staff report.
So Jeff, and I'm a cyclist, so I had a couple of really close calls in the last 2 weeks, and I'm just wondering if it's pertinent to share data like that, or share data that there are incidences that brings education awareness to drivers around how many incidents we're having with pedestrians and cyclists, or I'm not sure if we do that as a city, as part of an education.
Yeah, so annually the department does do an annual collision report where we do bring in those statistics with our vulnerable road users, so pedestrians, cyclists, and we can do a whole query of a whole bunch of different queries by age, by sex, that sort of thing. So we do have that ability. And you're right, it might be some valuable data to include in the report, but it wouldn't be the driver to change to justify the change. But it's definitely good information for the public.
Yeah, just perhaps something we could share on our active transportation site.
I agree.
Which would be kind of good, I think, for people to know what's actually going on. Just as a thought, because you guys do have all the data. But thanks, Jeff.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Those are really good points, Kelly, and I think maybe a good opportunity for the Vision Zero work that I know Brett is planning on doing as part of the Simcoe Barrie infrastructure program, and that data could be helpful with that work for sure. Any other questions or comments on this topic? I'm not seeing any. Awesome. Well, that's good news, Jeff. We appreciate the update on that, and it's good to know like there's a clear understanding of the impact of those signs, and I'm glad we're prioritizing vulnerable road users. We definitely need to do more of that, so we appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I did forget to mention one other agenda switch that happened. We do have a presentation from Sherry on the agenda on the Move program. That's correct, right, Sherry? I'm just looking at your face down. I'm like, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot. Okay.
No, that's right. Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay,
if
so
we can accommodate it.
That's great. So you're up next. Presentations are at the beginning of the agenda. So if you'd like to take it away, then go for it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm wondering if Brandy, would you be able to put the presentation up and go through the slides as I go through them, or would you prefer to do this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you would like me
Okay.
to share my screen, I am more than happy to do that. I will
Okay.
just pull it up and get it going for you.
That's great. Thank you. So
Not a
this,
problem.
so while Brandy's bringing that up, this is the Active School Travel Initiative that I had spoken about at the last meeting that I'd like to present about at some point. So thank you for allowing me to present it today. I'm pleased to share a status update. I had talked about this initiative in here and there occasionally over the last year or so. So yeah, great, thank you. So this active transportation initiative is specific to school communities. So the terminology for that is active school travel. So just a bit of a slight change in the terminology there. What you see on the screen here are the graphics that were designed for this initiative, and they can be used by partners as well. All the little characters and the background with the different seasons. And then you'll see this graphic being used throughout my presentation, and I can speak to the graphics package that is available for partners to use. We're trying to create a brand for the Simcoe Muskoka region for active school travel. Next slide. So just again, presenting on the Simcoe Muskoka On the Move initiative. On the Move is a tagline that's also been used by several of the schools who are part of our initiative. For example, like Oakley Park On the Move, Cundles Heights On the Move, that kind of thing. Next slide. So what I'm going to present today is what is the On the Move initiative, how it got started, why we need it, how it works at a very sort of basic level, and who's involved, who the stakeholders are, and what's occurred, what's the status now since we're sort of returning to this work after being away from it for a couple of years due to COVID, and then what will happen next, and then opportunities to support or be involved, which is relevant to this committee, and then I can answer any questions you have. Next slide. So Simcoe Muskoka On the Move is an active school travel initiative currently being led by our health unit, but it's in partnership with many other stakeholders within the region, including staff at the City of Barrie. So the purpose of the initiative is to encourage and support children within our region to be more physically active by using active modes of transportation, and you all know what that is, as much as possible for their school journey. Next slide. So this is a bit busy, but just a little bit of history there in terms of where we've been with active school travel, or formerly called active and safe routes to school. You might have heard that terminology years past, but many years ago, we kind of did a little bit of an environmental scan and learned that there were, a few schools here and there and within the City of Barrie as well that were doing, hosting some walk and wheel days or events, or they had maybe organized a walking school bus. They'd tag on to like a provincial theme day or month, bike month, etc. But there wasn't really a lot of like coordination or resourcing or support beyond what the school could sort of plan themselves. And it was hit and miss depending on who, was at the school at the time. As we know, the families change and the principals change, etc. We also learned that there were various stakeholders in our region and within the City of Barrie that had an interest in promoting more walking and cycling to school, again, without any coordination or collaboration in any sort of formal way. And the stakeholders, certainly were crucial in terms of collaborating to make it successful. And so the health unit held some workshops, and we invited stakeholders from all over Simcoe Muskoka, including City of Barrie, to attend some of those workshops. At those workshops, we did have Green Communities Canada present a couple of times. And Green Communities Canada, if you're unfamiliar with that organization, provide lots of resources around green initiatives, but also very specifically, they have a page that supports active school travel, and it's called the Ontario Active School Travel Initiative. So OST is a short form acronym for that, but they provide resources and support for using a best practice model for active school travel promotion. And I know this is another term, but it's called school travel planning, or sometimes we call it STP. So that is the model or the approach that they borrowed from the UK and modified for use across Canada. And that's the model that they promote for a comprehensive approach to dealing with the issue and promoting active school travel. So the Ontario Active School Travel Fund became available a few years back. That funding was provided by the Ontario Ministry of Education, and it became available. Green Communities Canada was the flow-through agency, and so we did work with some staff at the City of Barrie and did apply for that funding along with other stakeholders in the region, other municipalities, and the school boards were on board to support the application. Funding always brings people together, and so that was a great opportunity. So we agreed to lead that process to apply. And we were successful in receiving all $110,000 of our funding request for round one of that funding. And it certainly elevated our local stakeholder collaboration and coordination. So at that point, we then stepped in to coordinate the stakeholders around this, and we facilitated the school travel planning model within a number of schools within our region. 17 schools in total were invited to participate. We did survey principals and school boards to find out where there was interest and readiness, and we ended up with a number of 17. Next slide. And I'll mention too that 4 of those schools were in Barrie, and I'll mention their names in just a moment. So why do we need the Simcoe Muskoka on the Move initiative or support for active school travel in a comprehensive way? Mainly because there's a very deep and conclusive link between physical activity and health in our child and youth population. So higher levels of physical activity are associated with not only physical fitness and skill development, but brain and mental health and other measures like academic achievement, quality of life, mental, emotional, and social functioning, self-esteem, anxiety, depression. The list goes on, and there's lots of conclusive evidence that supports that. So it's expected that our On the Move initiative will increase awareness of the important role that active school travel plays in developing healthy kids, a healthy school environment, and a healthier community overall. With the comprehensive STP approach and increased local stakeholder involvement, we're striving not only to increase community awareness, but build local capacity for all of these things that are checked off there. So better understanding to address and reduce barriers for active school travel, create supportive environments and increase opportunities, increase social support, improve conditions and safety, and appreciate and witness in the end more walking and wheeling to school, resulting in obviously enhanced child health and development, improved air quality, school traffic congestion issues, safety concerns, and et cetera, and certainly some social issues and community connectedness, being that children, when they experience those opportunities to be in their neighborhood and engage with their neighborhood, it develops their skills for sure. And that's really important for their social and mental health. Next slide. So just a little bit more about the school travel planning model. So it's a collaborative community-based approach. And obviously we're using active modes of transportation for this part of the school journey specifically. It's considered best practice, as I mentioned, and importantly, it looks at barriers and opportunities as well as incentives. It brings school, municipal, and community stakeholders together, which is really fundamental. And those are the key stakeholders that really can make a difference and essential to the success. School community data is also collected and assessed so that priority actions can be developed. So each school has a plan that's unique to the needs of that school and what's been identified in that data collection. And the data collection includes a parent survey, a classroom survey. It includes traffic counts and walkabout and traffic observation at the school site, as well as a walkabout in the school neighborhood. So the plan is unique to each school and aims to be comprehensive in scope, using those 5 E's, covering the 5 E's, which some of you may be familiar with. So education, encouragement, enforcement, evaluation, and I'm missing one. Anyway, that's fine. Having a facilitator is key to the process. And there's a link as well right there to the Ontario Active School Travel page if you want more information. There's a lot there, and there's a toolkit that we refer to as facilitators, so that makes it very helpful. It's all sort of there for us to use, and anyone for that matter can be a facilitator. Okay, so next slide. So this is to give you a sense of the different sort of phases, as well as the stakeholders who are involved in that STP process at the school. So we also have a regional level committee as well as steering committee that's been established. But at the local school level, we'll see on the left there 1B. You establish a committee or use an existing committee at the school, a green team or a team, that would have an interest in this type of initiative, environmental advocacy group, etc. And you bring your stakeholders together and essentially you assess the conditions. That's what I mentioned earlier. We would do a walkabout, and many city staff at this Barrie have supported us in doing this walkabout, and we invite stakeholders. We've even had counselors come out, community members, parents, students, join us on the walkabout and look at what's happening in that morning, particularly the morning time, as people are on their way to school, families and students, and kind of observing what's happening, the routes people are taking, what the traffic flow looks like, assess the conditions in terms of sight lines, sidewalk conditions, pathways, trails, all that sort of information is very helpful. And that helps us to sort of understand what people are experiencing. And then we also, with the other data that we collect through the family surveys, et cetera, we develop a plan with priorities. And then, of course, over time, implement some of those actions from the plan. And then we would reassess to see over time if we're making a difference, and then keep it going. So school travel planning is not meant to be a one school year, one time sort of initiative. It's meant to build over time and evolve and change and carry over that plan from one school year to the next. So it's really important. One of the reasons why we need a facilitator is to help facilitate that process. The graphic on the right shows you at a regional level, a steering committee level, which we do have in place for Simcoe, Muskoka. We have the different sort of stakeholders who can become involved in that. And I would say we have a good representation for, at this point in time, from school boards, public health. We have invited police. We're waiting to hear back from police services. We certainly have municipal staff from various municipalities. And we're looking to invite representatives to represent students as well as parents. So in the middle, you see the STP facilitator. It can be the link between both. And then at the school level on the right, you would have various stakeholders from the school community involved in the initiative. Now, it's not to say you can't function with if you don't have all of these folks at the table, but certainly it works well if they can participate even ad hoc and provide their perspectives. But most importantly, we would like to have, student voice heard, parent voice heard, and certainly teachers and the principal. Next slide. So what's already occurred with the On the Move initiative in Simcoe, Muskoka is we held a media launch, and then we also received school board ethics approval for the initiative to collect the data that we do that needed to be reviewed and approved. And that was approved by the public board. And we mainly worked with the public board schools. And we did invite and select schools to participate. And like I said, there were 4 schools for Barrie, and that included initially Oakley Park, Trillium Woods, Willow Landing, and Cundles Heights. So then public health nurses like myself were assigned to work with participating schools and bring those stakeholders together and sort of follow that STP process that I mentioned. We established the regional steering committee, and we started holding meetings. We had probably, a good year's worth of meetings in there before the pandemic hit. But we just held a meeting yesterday and to reinvigorate and reconnect with those stakeholders. And we have some new people on board, and we're looking to expand open that up for other stakeholders to become part of the steering committee. And the steering committee would essentially be looking at the sustainability and providing that broader perspective across the region from multiple municipalities and school boards. So that's really important. There's lots of room to grow that and opportunities within that steering committee to do advocacy and even public awareness and collaborate on resources, etc. So as I mentioned, we developed the On the Move logo and brand. We created communication tools, which I'm not going to take the time to share all of them here, but just to mention them. And this committee can borrow any of these resources. We have banners, like fairly wide, big vinyl banners that can be hung on a fence or put up on a building. We have those long flipper feather flags. We have social media messages. We've also created videos, a series of videos to promote active school travel. And all of those resources are available to anybody within our region to use and promote at events or for specific initiatives to help create that brand and awareness and use that to promote active school travel. Also part of what's occurred so far and some of the monies that were taken from the funding was to conduct a policy scan to review local school board and municipal policies. We have that completed and we have that available, and we've not been able at this point yet to really present that and use that, but that's one of the things that the steering committee will be looking at. We also produced some signage. The signage includes, and Justin McDonald, I believe, has the signage for the city of Barrie. The signage includes, it's a metal sign that you can put up in the school neighborhood that says from this point forward, it's a 5-minute walk and a 3-minute cycle to school. And then there are different increments in terms of the distance. So it gives people a sense, of how long it'll actually take, because there's lots of misperceptions that it takes much longer than it actually does. And it has obviously the On the Move characters and logo there. And then we also created, so we have stencils for sidewalk or crosswalk painting that uses our logo and other creative elements to help make the journey interesting for students, like hopscotch and other sidewalk games. They can be used for a temporary application using like a chalk and student involvement, or they can be used with paint and be a permanent sort of application. Those are available for the municipality to borrow, or the school can borrow them for their school property, etc. And then we developed the On the Move website for resources specific to schools, parents, committees. We have lots of information, and all this stuff that I've mentioned in terms of resources all can be found on the website, including the links and information on how to book them. Next slide. So what's happening now? Some schools were able to move forward with some modified activities during COVID-19 and lots of kind of virtual things. Some were able to actually develop their action plan, but not really implement very much. What we're doing right now is we're reaching out to those schools. So we're reconnecting with them just to find out where things are at, whether they want us, and this has been going on for the last couple of months, whether they want to continue before the end of the school year with some activities and continue collecting data, or wherever they had left off before COVID-19 came about, or whether they want to wait till the fall before we reconnect with them and continue the work. So we're kind of in the process of assessing that. Some schools obviously put things on hold, and so we're just waiting to find out if they'd like to continue with the initiative or whether they just want to stop altogether, which is totally fine. There needs to be some interest and readiness, or otherwise it's too challenging. And the principal obviously has to agree to it. So there's growing interest in the initiative from the Catholic School Board, which is really nice. We have a new person that's been hired onto the board. Her name is Christine, and she is Christine Hyde, and she's actually joined our steering committee, and she's very engaged. So we had good engagement from the public school board prior to the pandemic, and we had representatives attending the steering committee and sometimes coming to the school meetings. They were very active, but we had less uptake and readiness from the Catholic board, but they are now on board and very keen. Also Trillium Lakelands District School Board. So it's been really good that way. So we're now in the process of getting those regional steering committees back up and running. Next slide. So what's going to occur next is we'll continue to work with the participating schools, giving priority to the 17 schools who were initially on board with us, and then re-engage in the fall with those who had begun the initiatives but had to put them on hold. We'll assess our capacity to support additional schools who have shown interest. So along the way, we agreed with our capacity and the funding to support those 17 schools across the region. But if some of them are not able to continue for whatever reason, we certainly can maybe look at inviting other schools to come on board if they're really looking at that comprehensive approach. We provide $800 to each school, and with that funding, we still have monies left to provide them with $800 for whatever activities on their action plan need some funding. And we will continue with the steering committee, and we'll also be continuing to increase public and stakeholder awareness of the importance of active school travel, and grow municipal and school board support and involvement. That's really important. And we continue to look for opportunities to advocate and present and speak to those stakeholders. Okay, next slide. I'm almost done here. So this is really a slide that's relevant to this committee, and this is opportunities to support or be involved in Simcoe Muskoka on the Move. So these are just suggestions of things that if anyone is interested, would like to take on and learn more about school travel planning and that model and share it with others. Visit the On the Move website. And I have a link that's coming that follows to view the resources and understand more about the initiative, connect with public health staff if you have questions, and certainly feel free to contact me. We want to continue to build community awareness of the importance of active transportation and active school travel, as this committee also has an interest in that. So continue to build that and borrow and set up on the Move the resources that I mentioned earlier. We can also use you can use the design package with the graphics to promote brand awareness and active school travel, and get involved in supporting or organizing or facilitating, for that matter, school travel planning at local schools if there's interest and readiness there, and consider attending the On the Move Regional Steering Committee and determine whether or not you'd like to become a member. Excuse me. So we talked about actually inviting additional stakeholders to that steering committee yesterday when we held the meeting. And there were certainly some great suggestions that we're going to reach out, like the Transportation Consortium. And we have had some engagement with them in the past, but we're now looking at maybe re-engaging them as well. So yeah, next slide. So there's my contact information, my email, which most of you have already. The second link is for the On the Move initiative, which is housed at on our health unit website. But all of the information is there, and the resources and how to borrow them, all of that. Information about the steering committee and the minutes from the past, everything is listed there. If there are parents who have, that have an interest in active school travel and getting more actively involved, we have a parent section as well with information there, or just raising awareness about the importance of active school travel and just sort of trying to get parents to understand the value. We have resources for that as well. And then the Ontario Active School Travel website link that I mentioned earlier that provides across Canada the school travel planning model and approach and all the resources that they have to share with school communities. And that's the end. The last slide, please. So thank you for your time this morning for me to present on this. It's long overdue. I've talked about this initiative in little bits in the past, but I don't think that I've ever really fully described it in its entirety and given a status update on that. So I invite you to ask any questions you have at the moment.
Thanks so much, Sherry. That's awesome. Lots of good information there. And it's nice to hear that there's some renewed energy and work being done there. I see Anne Marie's hand. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Sherry. So I'm just wondering about moving forward with some actions. So knowing that you've got the resources around signage, do I as a ward councillor, have the potential to bring something to the city if facilitation of that is needed more formally through council with Keenan, or is this something that staff have any comment on around the ability for us to actually make sure those signs are not sitting in a cupboard somewhere, but are actually out and around some of our schools? So what would be the appropriate next step around getting those signs erected in the school areas? And I would be happy to promote Ward 3 and facilitate that with schools if you need some help.
Great.
Justin's got a hand up. I'm not sure if that's related to my comments or not.
Justin, were you raising your hand to speak on that particular question? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as Sherry alluded to, we do have signs at the intervals of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 15-minute walking routes for the 4 participating schools that we have currently within Barrie, which are Oakley Park, Willow Landing. Sherry, can you help me out with the other 2?
Yeah, Trillium Woods and Cundall's Heights, although a couple of them had to be put on hold. So we'd have to go back and assess their readiness to continue on those. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for that. So we do have the signs, and they currently have not been installed. That's unfortunately just due to coordination between the various parties. So just in terms of the process, the sign implementation would be coordinated through Jeff Sharp's group, and then implemented and physically pounded in and installed by our boat operations crew. So we unfortunately just haven't had a chance to kind of coordinate that, but our goal is to have them implemented for the September start. So that's awesome. That is our game plan. We do have the signs in hand, and with regards to additional signage, Sherry, you might have a bit more information, but from my understanding, there was a bit of funding extra that may be able to use to purchase additional signage through the balance of the funding that we received from the original program. So that would be, I guess, a request through Sherry and the health unit to kind of get those. And then, sorry, go ahead, Sherry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So that would kind of be the next steps. But currently right now, we're only really focusing on the 4 schools that were enrolled. And then I guess it would really be seeing what kind of interest there is from schools. And how that gets actioned, I'm not really sure. I leave that up to the committee, but that's kind of where we're at. Is we have means to implement the 4 schools that are currently moving forward. Definitely willing to work with you guys to figure that out.
Thank you. In follow-up, so thank you, Justin. So I'm hearing you don't need, at least for that, the intent originally, that's all in play. September target, you don't need council support or any type of funding. That's all covered within ops and the health unit at this time. And then for the other schools, should there be a budget? I'm not sure what that looks like. Is there any communication that could potentially go to members of council? Or would it be more appropriate to go to schools directly if other schools are interested but are not one of the four? What's the best direction for communication?
Is that a question for me? And
maybe because I've got, for instance, a newsletter going out and calls to schools. So I could incorporate this, but it'd be good to know where to direct schools or to counselors to engage with their schools if they're having those conversations. So if others are, I guess, specifically, if other schools are interested in having signs for the 5, 10, 15 minutes around active transportation to their locations, but they're not part of the current program, what's the direction to get them engaged? Would it be to you, Sherry?
So, of course, there's limited funding that remains that's intended to support all of the regions, Simcoe, Muskoka. So you can imagine it's somewhat limiting in terms of the amount of signage that could be purchased for all of those municipalities. But we can certainly, if there's a request from the city to purchase a limited amount of additional signage in addition to what's been provided, if you want to send that request through me, and then I can filter that up to find out, you know, what we can afford to pay for. And Anne-Marie, any other schools who have an interest in active school travel and potentially this comprehensive school travel planning approach, I would suggest that that you direct a request through to me. And what we'll have to do is we'll have to assess our capacity to support them. Now, there's varying levels of support that we could provide. Certainly any communication resources that you want to borrow from our On the Move webpage. Certainly feel free to take any of those things and modify them and use them in newsletters to just generally promote active school travel. But where there's an interest and readiness for schools to address things in a more comprehensive way and actually establish a bit of a group or committee to kind of do those assessment pieces, like I mentioned earlier, and bring the stakeholders together, that requires facilitation. So that then draws on our public health resources. So we would have to assess those as our capacity permits, but certainly those requests can also come through to me and we can make some decisions on our capacity to support them. I don't think we're going to be inundated. Our experience so far is when we put it out there initially to invite schools to identify their interest and readiness, we weren't bombarded. We actually only received 4 at the time. And we took all 4 into the program when we initially applied for the funding. So if it's an additional few schools, we probably would be able to provide that level of support. If it was beyond that, then we'd have to modify our level of support and maybe just provide them with resourcing and be available to be consulted and, you know, support ad hoc, as opposed to sort of striking a committee and being very engaged in a more detailed way. So I hope that answers the question.
That does. I've got a last quick question. While we're promoting active transportation, being wheeling or walking to school, are we seeing that there's appropriate infrastructure at schools to support kids that are kind of bringing their bikes and leaving them, or is that a bit of a gap between our promotion?
Well, see, that's the thing is, it's one thing to encourage and support, like, you know, support people to go ahead and, you know, try active school travel and active transportation. But if there are issues, concerns that parents have, perceived or real barriers that haven't been addressed, that's going to be very limiting in terms of their ability to actually make that happen. Even though they may want to, there could be some real barriers in terms of their ability to feel comfortable to let their child go ahead and walk or wheel to school. So that's why it's really critical that part of this comprehensive approach is to sort of also assess what is happening and what is the feedback that we're getting from parents about their concerns or barriers, real or perceived, so that we can try and put a plan in place that will address them to reduce those barriers and make it easier for them to make that choice. And so just to go out and say, you know, it's important that you walk or wheel to school, that's fine, but it's also very limiting if there's not the infrastructure and environment that supports that. And having addressed what other social barriers there might be as well.
Okay, thank you.
That's an important point. And that speaks to that 5th engineering. That's the one.
That's it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I see. Justin, did you want to jump in on this? I saw your hand go up.
Yeah.
The earlier discussion. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Phelan. Just want to touch base on the previous comment with regards to that I probably should have alluded to with regards to signage. Should there be interest beyond kind of what the health unit has capacity to do, the health unit has also digitized all the signs and templates, so we could actually get a digital copy, and then the city could kind of outsource manufacturing our own signs as well. But that would be a cost associated with the cities in terms of budget intakes and things like that. But those stencils are digitized that we could take those to go to a graphics shop to actually manufacture those. Just then that also continues a consistent messaging across the board. And then with regards to barriers, as Sherry mentioned, we did do walkabouts with the schools. So we were on site with schools, and we had to kind of identify barriers from an infrastructure perspective, both on site and external. And that it could be anywhere from, maybe we need more bike racks at a particular school, or maybe there's a gap in the sidewalk that we could, include in the sidewalk infill program, or things of that nature. Enhanced pavement marking, so things of that nature. Like I'll give an example. So we did the walkthrough for Willow Landing, and we noted that one of the roads abutting the school with a direct connection to the catwalk wasn't actually a reduced speed limit and a school zone. So through those walkabouts, we implemented a reduced speed limit and the school zone. So through those walkabouts and through the boots on ground, and in a sense, we were kind of able to identify some things that we could do, short wins, and try to plan for the long terms if there was like say gaps in terms of sidewalks or things of that nature. So we have been very detailed in terms of the 4 site specific schools. Now that is very time consuming and is not replicatable across all 60 elementary schools within the city, but it is something to consider that is what we have done for the full school, 4 schools currently enrolled.
Thanks, Justin. I see Andy's hand is next, and then John.
Hi. Okay. So Living Green, we have the 10 actions for climate, and we associate them with each month. And so for July, our action for climate is tread lightly. And so for each of these events, for each of these month themes, we try and do at least one event, and then all of our social media, our newsletters, and everything like that is all related to that particular activity. So again, July is tread lightly. We are having on the 23rd of July, it's a Saturday, our Tread Lightly event in partnership again with Open Air Dunlop. And that's with the Electric Vehicle Society. And we're bringing down a bunch of EVs, EV owners, so they can chat with people about this idea of my next car is going to be electric. Last year, we were able to partner with Firebird Community Cycle. I'm hoping that they'll be there again. We're working on that. But I am thinking that this might be, if there's an opportunity, Sherry, through this, because we do have us with a booth with our volunteers down there today to promote this for this initiative. It's a good fit. And then this may be a way, I know that staffing is always a challenge. So if you would like us to sort of promote that, that's something we do. Or if you want to tag on with us, that would be great. And along the same lines, I'll put that challenge back out to the city. And if the city would like to do anything, I know that the city bus is going to be doing something. City Transit is going to be having a bus on the street to try and promote this idea of getting around on the city buses. But to tag it on to the one day, July 23rd. I'll just put that out there. I should have actually put this on the agenda to just talk about that we now have a firm date for it, but I thought it does fit really well with what we were just speaking about. So thought I'd put that out there now. We could chat about it a separate meeting if that would help.
Thank you. I appreciate the offer. Can we have an aside conversation about this? Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. I'll email you.
Awesome. Good stuff. John, take it away.
Thanks, Keenan. And thanks, Sherry, for the presentation. Great job. Again, it's great work with a comprehensive review, and you guys have done a great work on this. And I think it's really important that you guys have done such a comprehensive scope for what's being done. I guess just wondering about, the number of schools and how we're going to bring in other new schools. You said you've got some nurses contacting schools when they've got the resources. And I'm just wondering about if you're bringing a new school in to get their foot in the door with something small, is that like is that something that you've got options for? Where I think my concern is when they first look at this, some schools and school and parent councils and whoever's looking to help out thinks, oh, this is a huge task, it's a lot of work. I don't want to take that much on, but they might be willing to start with just a small event here and there. Is that like, is that something that you can be the facilitator for, like the public health unit can be the facilitator for an event here and there for a couple of schools if we get them?
So to attend the event, you mean to provide information at the event, or do you mean just to provide resources for the event?
Yeah, resources to facilitate and coordinate that, like their first event just to get started. So
that would have to be a request that the school would have to make of us, and then we would have to assess our capacity. I think if we have the capacity, we certainly would. So yeah, I would say yes, that's possible. And also we can provide them with resources. So if they want to put something in their school newsletter or on social media or on their website, just in terms of raising awareness about the importance of active school travel, we have all of that ready to go. So that's easy to pick up and go with. In terms of broader public awareness and community awareness, we also are looking at, for back to school, getting something ready before September, and putting something out across the region as well in terms of social media. And we'll be working on those messages as well. But we do have some ready to go resources that schools can use right now. If there was an event, let's say for the end of the school year, we could offer that, but yeah.
Great. Yeah. So like if a school came up and said that, well, we're thinking we might be able to do walk and wheel Wednesdays, you guys could help facilitate with that. Like if we directed them to the health unit, then they could show them, here's the information that they've got for it, and help them go forward with that. Is that the idea?
Yes. Yes, that's within the realm of our ability and skills. It's just capacity sometimes can be an issue. So I can't say that we would say yes to every single request, but certainly you can direct schools to make that request and they can send it directly to me. And we can just assess our capacity to support them. If it's facilitation, we'd have to assess that. If it's just to take the resources, we can share them easily. So
great. Okay. But you're not actually searching out, like you don't have nurses offering that opportunity right now, like to new schools at this point, going to new schools. So I guess my concern, my thought is that if there's trying to get them on board it seems to be a challenge alone. Like it seems to me like a straightforward, obvious thing that everyone, once you hear this once, everyone should be on board with getting more kids walking to school. But I've kind of found that it's a lot tougher than that. You've got to kind of seek them out and say, how about doing one little thing here? Can you start with one little thing? Are your nurses or is your team, are they doing that, or is that something that they can do?
No, proactively going out and searching for schools to come on board right now? No, we're not doing that. Just because we have limited capacity. So, and we're trying to just reassess where the schools that we had engaged with before the pandemic, where they're at now. And once we determine if they're going to continue in that full scope of that comprehensive approach, it requires a lot of resourcing from us. Yeah. Once we determine all of that, then we'll know what capacity we have left for additional schools. But to go out and proactively seek them out at this point in time, we're not doing that. If they make a request to us that's around active school travel, and it may be something as simple as a presentation or to attend event to provide resources, we can certainly assess that and do that. That's within our realm of skills and ability.
Okay, great. So yeah, so us as members, maybe we still have that opportunity to push schools to go to you. I guess I think that's maybe an option for our members, councils, and everyone. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, perfect. I think that's it. Yeah.
I see Justin's hand, and I'm just cognizant of the fact that it's 11 and we still have a few more agenda items to get through, but Justin, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick point on resourcing. John, a good starting point may be to utilize the stencils that we have through On the Move, that the schools could actively participate in, say, painting their parking lot, like the walking routes to their parking lot, and that may be a quick low barrier to entry in terms of getting engagement from parent groups. So those stencils are available, correct, Sherry, to schools to utilize. So it may be an interactive and low barrier way to kind of bridge that gap to get that engagement started. So just food for thought. So
sorry, that's I was wondering, so you mean, so there's stencils that you paint either with chalk or like spray paint chalk or?
Yes, yeah, and I can get Sherry to send over myself the stencil package, and then I can forward that on to the committee so that you can kind of see what we have available. And those stencils are readily available to lend out where needed. So it may be a good kickoff point for engagement. So
Is the paint supplied by the city as well, or whatever it is, or is that
currently we don't have anything with regards to that? It would kind of be up to the schools, but we do have the stencils to do hopscotch, and I believe there's some jumping stones, or I forget exactly what we did, but when I get the package, I can send that off, and just as a starting point with regards to trying to promote that internal to the school itself. So.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Good suggestion. It could be a fun activity to rope people in. I see Kelly, your hand just went up.
Really quickly, Keenan, as Justin, thank you. I was wondering, I had a question because you spoke about the ability to reduce speed in zones when you did a walkabout. And can you tell me how complicated that is? A process? Is that a council thing that has to go through council? Or do you do that? How does it happen, I guess?
Certainly. So the process to amend a speed bylaw currently right now is current practice for the city of Barrie is to reduce speed limits within 250 meters of a school that has direct connection to a roadway. And that's kind of in accordance with the Highway Traffic Act. The process is, does it meet the requirements? Is it a school with a direct connection? Yes or no? The report would be prepared and then council would have to endorse it. And that is kind of a very quick synopsis. That time frame really depends on it's Jeff's group that would prepare it, so I can't really speak in terms of timing, but that is the process. Is that we have a criteria in terms of does it meet it, yes or no, and then a report and a mail out would go through the formal process and then go to the report to council to endorse.
Perfect. Thank you, Justin.
Not a problem.
Keenan, before we close this, I know you want to move on with the agenda. I just wanted to ask if we could have this put back on a future agenda before school starts in September for a quick sort of update and discussion about how we might be able to promote back to school walk and wheel, and also to explore the idea of more signage for additional schools, because I mean, you don't have to be part of the 4 schools necessarily to benefit from the signage. I mean, that would be ideal if a lot of school communities had, or all of them had all that signage. So I'd like to have more discussion about that at a future meeting if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I wanted to discuss briefly with the committee as well, as having a meeting in July or August. I think we've talked a bit about this before, that there may be some appetite to do that. And this is a good thing to talk about at one of those meetings. So I'll connect with Brandy about scheduling a meeting in July or August, and we can try and figure out what's best for the committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sherry. Thanks for that awesome discussion. With that, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is invasive species. So this was requested to be put on by Kelly, and she had some questions about the process for identifying locations where there are invasive species on city property and sort of the process for removal. So Kelly, I don't know if you want to sort of start off that discussion. We do have Kevin Rankin here from the Parks Operations and Forestry, who may be able to speak to some of your questions.
That's great. Thank you, Keaton. I appreciate that. I appreciate that being put on the agenda as well. I guess it's kind of it's a big topic, of course, but I have heard from some citizens around Barrie regarding the invasive species and kind of the process about reporting, because it does say on the website, here, report your invasive species locally to this number at the city of Barrie, and they just haven't been receiving any follow-up. So I'm wondering if we have a process in place for tracking, making sure that, and I know, Kevin, that they're all over the place and it's madness, of course. So is there something logical in place that a process that happens and how we address it? And the other point that also, and I know the city of Mississauga has this great event that get citizens, and I know we've got lots of them that would be willing to participate in a citizen invasive species poll group work. And my other thought was, is there some way we can redirect some of our summer students that are doing a lot of maintenance pieces around horticulture kind of thing, once a week, perhaps redirect to an invasive species poll. So those are kind of my ideas and suggestions and questions. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Kelly, I think you're right that big or huge or massive project problem is probably the best way to describe it. Yeah, there are invasive species that we are monitoring, tracking, and mapping across the city. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've had staff using the Ontario Invasive Plant Council's monitoring app, so you can actually mark out where you find them, what's there, send a picture in, and then they catalog it and confirm whether or not it is an invasive or not. Under our current resourcing, the only invasive species that we actively deal with managing are those that are a risk to human health. So giant hogweed, poison ivy, those sort of things where you're dealing with something that will cause harm to a human using the area or even a pet, right? But as far as the general invasive species, there's only a couple of limited areas where we do have funding or groups that are involved in active polls. So you've got the North Shore Trail. There's a small group of people who work very hard on trying to maintain some of it there. There's a group calling themselves Frag Busters who do some polls for Phragmites. And then in certain areas, we have done some cutting and removals where we have to do it for public safety reasons. But there is no resourcing, and we have asked on a number of occasions for the resources to do it, and there just isn't. It's not there yet. We need a large policy and framework in place to manage it, and then a prioritization schedule where we would go, what's the spots to go. I mean, great idea to use existing staff and students, but you have to understand that we're not keeping up with our existing service levels with the staffing we have, so we can't organize and send them out to do something a day a week or even a day a month to tackle that. We've got other issues to keep up with as well. So kind of a bit of a nutshell, the overview of it.
That's helpful. Kevin, I see Anne Marie's hand. Go ahead.
I know certain departments are usually feeling that we're not actually got you staffed up to the levels for current, but would this committee be a table to be advocating or motioning for an intake form for 2023 for a resource to be considered in the next budget that would float up through council? And or when we think about the work plan of this committee in the next 4 years, would the topic of invasive species be one that we should formalize into our mandate with some consideration, or a sub-working group that could support putting some resident activation where appropriate and engagement forward around invasives? I know we've got I've met some North Shore Trail members who I believe have expressed, the volume of work to be done and maybe could be supported by more residents if they're aware and taught how to do it properly. So is there a role for this committee or individuals around this committee to support those groups you mentioned, Kevin, or for this committee to formally advocate, align to our strategic directions around greener Barrie and climate action and just some of those management pieces, a resourcing need that could help to focus on, I think, the limited resources you're experiencing?
That question is for me. I would say the invasive species management plan was identified in the climate change implementation plan, but none of those implementation items were funded or resourced over the past few years since it's been put in place. Staff spent a lot of time figuring out how would we do those things, or how we would tackle them, and how they would be resourced. And yeah, until they're prioritized, what's the highest level item to start focusing on, then kind of at a standstill and getting started. But
would it be of value to bring that back to this committee? I'm not sure if this committee has a top of mind awareness of what was in that, and if there would be a position of this committee to advocate for an intake form for resourcing or prioritization. I know Kevin's looking to get in.
Kevin, yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Councillor Ayo and Councillor Congo. Yeah, Kevin and I have worked on this together for some time. I think my recommendation to the committee would be to, one, the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and remember that is only plants, so we're not talking about fauna as well that's invasive, it's just dealing with flora. They offer presentations to councils. So that might be a first step, whether it's a presentation to the committee or to building committee or to council through their webpage. That's one. And I think I would, after that part two, I think the intake form or next step that I would suggest is to actually do the strategy, build a framework for invasive species, which will then pick up the stewardship models, the policy, the enabling policy that Kevin was referring to, pick up the resourcing, an implementation plan at a high level. The conservation authorities are ahead of us with that. Both Lake Simcoe and Nottawasaga both have invasive species. Mississauga has a good one. York has one. I'm sure there's other cities that are doing it too, but Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I think that's the really first big step. Is the city needs a strategy, an overarching strategy, because it's not just parks. You know, we're talking about stormwater management facilities, we're talking about waterfronts, we're talking about marina operations in terms of how boats are cleaned. There's so much to it that I would suggest to the committee that maybe that's the first step, is to kind of talk about that strategy and how it's developed and when it's developed. Kevin, I don't know if you have any comments to that to add.
Yeah, the only other large aspect that we struggled with when we were talking about this during the climate change strategy is the amount of invasives on private land. Like, we talk about parks and natural areas and such, but from what I've seen, my own experience, there's as much or more on private land properties across the city that we just don't have any way of forcing them to deal with. So that's a big part of it as well. We can clean it up all on our property, and then the next year it'll seed in and be right back. So it is a big process.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. Emery, did you have any follow-up on that?
I guess the action is this, so I'm going to move us to an action and see what the committee's at. Are you comfortable if I reach out to the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and do we want a presentation here or to City Council? I mean, here is great because then we can, I think it falls within the mandate and it's recorded, so then we can always share it with members of council's background content. Could I take that next step?
I think that's a great next step. Absolutely.
And then from that, I'll kind of redirect to Kevin and let me know if it's better to kind of get into the minutia offline. If there's, at this point in time, you know, are we ready, even as a committee, knowing that we're coming up to end of June soon, to endorse that the City Council identify a strategy for invasive species, and then we can maybe move something when ready to council that's fleshed out a little bit more, that can be a bit more directive about an intention with alignment. Or Kevin, do you think that's jumping the gun a little bit?
Thank you, Councillor Congo. If the question's for this, Kevin.
Hot potato, yeah.
I think the committee would benefit from the presentation firm. It might inform your decision making and thinking where you would like to see it go, and might give you also a sense of the magnitude of what it is we're talking about. And because it really would be a cross-organizational project. It really would not just be a parks focus, as Kevin alluded to. This is a significant undertaking, and probably why a lot of cities have shied away from it at this point. They just don't know where to start.
Okay, I'll take that next step, and then I'll look to us to have further conversation, but if we're meeting through the summer, so I can offer some dates and times, and then from there, I'm hearing there's not a missed opportunity if we don't move further at this point in time, and we can wait for a presentation.
Yeah,
okay.
That's good.
Still any value in intake forms for the fall in general that support our mandate? And maybe that's an awful lot, but I'll throw it out there to kind of say, is there anything that this committee can support if staff and departments that support our mandate are seeing workload issues and we're not able to kind of get to the work that we've kind of identified to staff as important? Hot potato.
Yeah. I'm not sure if either Kevin wants to speak to that, but it's okay if not.
I'll leave it there. And yeah, if it's because it is a hot potato, but I would just say it'd be great to see if this committee can support or vocalize the need to address any shortage of staff in areas that we are expecting progress to be made in, aligned to our mandate, and that those intake forms can be motion to be brought forward for the 2023 budget.
And perhaps there's a larger conversation about the climate change adaptation plan, implementation plan itself, because it seems like there are quite a few items in that implementation plan that don't have resourcing behind them. So perhaps that can be a focus of our transition document too. Like, this needs to be a priority. Like, we have the strategy in place and the implementation plan, but not the resourcing to back it up. So that's a large issue with that plan, and maybe something we can advocate for generally. Kevin Rankin, I see your hand up there.
I was just going to add exactly what you said. There's a lot of integrated pieces to that climate change adaptation strategy that a lot of them tied together. And I could say back in 2019-ish, we tried to do some of that to say, here's some priorities. If we were to resource this, we could tackle A, B, and C in the next 2 years, and then D, C, and E, and on down the process. So and keep them all organized in terms of priority and what council told us would be the priority to tackle first.
Kelly.
Take that away and connect with you, Keenan, and the Kevins.
For sure. Sounds good. Go ahead, Kelly. You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that from both Kevins. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly the point I was going to make, and I'm not sure if Caitlin and Adam, have a little bit of information or perhaps goals when it comes to action and resources tied to our climate action strategy, because we kind of need to move on that. And I'm not sure, if those budget items were attached, and I don't think they were. Lots of action items, but nothing really backing it up. So I think that's very, very important as part of that piece. The other thing that I wanted to say, and and I think it's like Kevin Rankin mentioned, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many invasive species on private property. Part of that whole thing around education, right? That, how do we do a better job of that for education and letting people know. One of the things I heard that are frustrating, if we're going to ask people to report invasive species to the city, which we do on that site, it's a bit of a vacuum because they're not getting back. So people are excited to report, I saw this or I saw that, but nobody's really getting back to them saying thank you, or that's great, thanks for doing that. If we can't do anything about it, then we probably shouldn't ask people to report it to the city, because I think their expectation is that the city will respond and say, I guess that those are the comments that I've heard about that, not getting that feedback. And again, that's maybe part of the education piece as well. So I just wanted to point that out, because if we keep asking people to report invasive species and we don't do anything about it, whether in the small term or long term or short term, maybe we should remove that. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I wonder, is that data still helpful, even if it's just being logged? Kevin, did you have?
I was just going to ask, where in particular, is it a website address that we've got that identified? I know we had a couple of signs in areas where we knew there was invasives and we were gathering information.
I think there's on the city website, there's an invasive species page. And I think in there's a reporting, there is reporting to the Ontario, like the larger one, but there's also one to the city. I think there's a mention of, I don't know if it's calling Service Barrie or I'm not sure which, but it seems to be a bit of a vacuum and people report it, but nothing gets done about it. So they're not really sure why they're reporting it.
So maybe that's some information on that page. It needs to be updated. The reason why one of the staff members built that process early on is so that residents and park users could point out where it was and we could get an idea of how much we were dealing with, where it is, the type of species that are showing up, etc. So
I think it's a great idea, yeah, but just let them know that they're not gonna get calls back or they're not gonna get actioned on it. So if it maybe was worded a little differently, so they could be part of the solution by reporting for you guys to keep track of it. But please understand that we're not going to solve this problem for you today, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do see on the page that it's asking people to report on city property to Service Barrie. And so I would expect that Service Barrie would have some sort of follow-up, even if that's just to say thank you for reporting and it's logged and that's helpful for data collection. You may not have the resources to tackle. So maybe that's a conversation for Service Barrie. And then it looks like if it's on private property, it's reporting to that Ontario-wide EDD mapping system. So yeah, I'm not sure if Kevin, you can take that to Service Barrie or Access Barrie to maybe clarify some of that on the website.
I think so. We can have a look at it and make sure that the wording is clear for people to understand that we're in reporting stages, but there aren't any active plans to remove things.
Yeah.
It also helps us with getting volunteers because that's how some of the groups started up. They reported it, they contacted, staff contacted them back, and they wanted to do garlic mustard polls, for example. So it does generate some value from that end as well.
Have some recipes for garlic mustard pesto or something on there to encourage people to get out and use it. I saw Laurel's hand go up briefly, and I just want to make sure if you wanted to say anything on this that you had a chance.
Yeah, I think you addressed my question, Keenan. I was just going to say that I think collecting data is always a good thing. So we want to necessarily stop that, but just putting a disclaimer on there that maybe there won't be a response is the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Laurel. Anything else on invasive species before we move on? I think we have some solid next steps, presentation, and perhaps some communications changes on the website, and then we can talk about resourcing that larger conversation. Okay. Next up is NOMO May, and John was the committee member who requested that this be put on the agenda, and we do have a representative from Bylaw Enforcement, Jason Forgrave, here today. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you sitting through the meeting and being here as a resource for us on the yard maintenance bylaw and this conversation. So John, I don't know if you wanted to introduce the concept and what you were thinking with this item.
Sure, thanks, Ken. Yeah, so having kind of completed that NOMO May period, and this is based on anecdotal information, but it heard that some people may be getting calls from Bylaw about having longer yards coverage during this period, and I just thought maybe it's an opportunity to look back at the Bylaw. It doesn't identify anything specifically in there, just says that there's a 30 centimeter requirement to keep your lawn at a certain height. And just wondering if the committee's in support of maybe seeing if we can get that changed or if that is currently an issue. So I guess that's the one point compared or related to the bylaw. And then the other part is maybe on the other side, maybe we should be looking at finding a way to provide signs for people who are participating in this. So then if people understand why they're doing it and also kind of get some other support if other people don't know what's going on, then they see about it. So that was my thoughts. And I don't know if maybe Jason can speak to whether or not this has been an issue, if that was just all horror stories that don't actually exist, but interested to hear. Yeah.
Jason?
Thank you, Councillor Owen. May starts our very busy season for yard maintenance bylaw complaints. We get hundreds starting in May, and most of them are for long grass and weeds. The bylaw standard currently for a residential or occupied property is 15 centimeters, so 6 inches. We get numerous, including a ward councillor providing 120 locations 2 weeks ago with long grass and weeds in their ward. So it is a big concern for a lot of citizens this time of year. So yes, those people saying that they received complaints from the city, they likely did.
Interesting. Wow. It wasn't me who reported. It wasn't me who reported the 120 locations.
No, it was
just
not.
Putting that out there. Yeah.
Present councillors aside, it was not.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly, did I see your hand?
This is a bigger conversation, and I don't want to start it here. You know, my group Pollinate Barrie, and naturalization of spaces on lawns, including all of our pollinator plants and naturalized spaces. So the no mow May, I didn't realize, Jason, thank you for that information. I had no idea that there are that many complaints. That's really helpful because boy, do we need some education and some changed bylaws when it comes to naturalization and encouraging our pollinator plants. And the no mow May is a good start, you know, and I think it has something to do with the dandelions, which really don't feed our bees at all, but it kind of started in Britain and we've kind of adopted it. So there's a bigger conversation there, and I'm not going to start it here, but I just wanted to put my hand up and talk about how important it is to have the consideration from a bylaw perspective to think about naturalization spaces in our front yards, supporting bees and pollinators, and anyway, that's and boulevards, of course, as well. So that's a bigger conversation, but thanks, Jason, for the info. I had no idea. Oh my goodness.
Just to provide some clarification on that, natural gardens are permitted under the bylaws, provided they're still maintained. Just letting things grow wild is not permitted. But if somebody was putting in a pollinator patch type idea, that is permitted, as long as it's still a structured area.
So I was thinking about, you know, how can we move this conversation forward? And I wonder if maybe a motion from this committee, I was thinking something along the lines of like that staff and enforcement services investigate a yard maintenance bylaw amendment to include an exemption to allow for residents to participate in No Mow May in order to support biodiversity. I think that could be a good start. You know, we probably would get some backlash from residents if there was an exemption in place for No Mow May, but it could go a long way to raising awareness about the benefits and combating some of that misunderstanding about natural yards, because it is like a culture shift that we need.
Something to consider too would be, as of June 1st, all those people are now going to call, and it's just going to push everything, compound it to June 1st instead of spreading it over the month. So there should be some consideration for that as well.
That's an important point for sure. Laurel, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe John mentioned the 30 centimeter limit, and maybe that could be included as well, because the likelihood that something would grow higher than that seems kind of low. I don't know, at least for me it was. And then maybe also bringing this forward would like you said, promote the idea and also maybe give us a better understanding of what the rationale for so many complaints actually is. It's shocking to me, but anyway.
Andy, and then John.
Yeah, so I think Jason's been to my house. So I have one of those neighbors that has a very different vision for how yards are supposed to look. And I do wonder if this committee and possibly through Living Green and Pollinate Barrie, we could get together and get some decorative or nice looking signs made that just plop, I love my natural garden. I love my pollinator garden, something that indicates intent. Because I think this is where things fall apart, is there's intent, I meant to do this, and then there's derelict neighbor, I don't care about my yard and screw you neighbor. And I think this is where a lot of the conflicts are happening. So I'm wondering if this is something that the city is able, I know, you know, if we can get some support there to do it, we can design something based on what works well in other municipalities. And it's just, again, a very small sign, probably around the same size, ironically, as those pesticide stay off my yard signs. But this is saying that I'm doing this on purpose. If that may just help be a little bit to bridge a little bit of that gap. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Great. Yeah, I was thinking there's the Barrie garden signs, right? I don't know the right term for it, but there's if you're on the garden route, or if it doesn't need your lawn as being a city berry garden. That's kind of that's the sign that I was kind of envisioning.
The communities in bloom.
Communities in bloom. There you go. There, I don't know that. Yeah. So there's a little sign that they've got for that. I would think some things like that were, and then hopefully we've got enough of them that it's very obvious. Yeah. Once you've seen a couple of them, you know what's going on with those ones. Yeah. Just one question, I guess, for Jason. So would it be as simple to changing the bylaw? Do you think, like, there's exemptions in 4.3? Would it just be a matter of adding the month in there, like with the exclusion of the month of May in section 4.3? Would it be that simple, or does it need to be more than that, do you think?
I mean, an exemption could be that simple. It would be up to council to discuss and you know, pass or not, or make amendments to the motion. But yes, it could be as easy as putting in an exemption to the bylaw.
Okay, great.
Kelly, and then
Amber. Jason, do you have the specific criteria when you say that pollinator gardens are accepted? Is it in the specific bylaw where it states exactly what it is that's accepted for that?
There are some, like I said, it has to be maintained. There can't be any noxious weeds, or in the previous conversation, the invasive species. Things like that would be items that the officers would instruct them to remove. Other than that, any type of garden is permitted. Again, just not wild growth, you know, like you said before, just those property owners that don't seem to care, and they're calling it a natural garden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it must be sometimes a hard distinction too, I think, because, you know, milkweed is a native, not a noxious weed that was taken off the list. So we often have milkweed because it is a specific feeder for monarch butterflies. So I guess, you know, it may be a little vague for your bylaw folks, maybe. I don't know that, you know, come and check on things. So I think Andy's a good point about the signage, and also a conversation perhaps around what that might look like, and kind of like, you know, City of Barrie approved naturalized space kind of thing, which would help educate as well as kind of, you know, not let people call the service berry numbers on the garden areas. Just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm. I had Anne-Marie next, and then John, and then Andy.
Jason, a quick thought came to mind even about what would be a benefit to the team around enforcement and follow-up. So whether or not the signs happen, but I was thinking about the Boulevard Garden program where it's free, but it needs registration. And there's a very clear understanding of the parameters by which that's allowed, be it dates or sizes, right? And so I didn't know if something like that would be a program that would benefit the team to kind of say, yeah, this house, if there is a call-in and a complaint, whether or not the sign is there or not, but that this individual, this household actually has registered and they know by June 1st, there's a different expectation, but it might prevent bylaw from actually needing to come out to see what's going on there. Would that be an adaptable program that would make sense or not really?
I mean, structure always helps, for sure. I don't know if that would necessarily go through us.
If it didn't, would it help at least enforcement to know what properties have signed up for kind of the no mow May, and that it might reduce enforcement going out to a property around your time and effort?
Yes, for sure.
But we could plant it with beautification efforts around, I think, Stephanie Weidman's group and whatnot, where we've got communities in bloom, and then we're adding other initiatives. So if that's something I could see where it would make sense, but maybe we want to replicate that type of process and have people signing up for next May.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. John?
Thanks. Sorry, I lost track of what I was originally thinking of talking about last time. So with Laurel's comment about the 30 centimeters, the only part I'd add to that was like, depending on the direction of your lot, our lot happens to face north, so our front lawn doesn't grow as fast as some other places. I was blown away with looking at it and how tall some of the grasses in different on different streets are, just because of the way that the light hits their lawn, or the way that the growing season went for that year. So I guess for me, I would be a little hesitant to put in a 30 centimeter cap on that, but I'm certainly open to everyone's thoughts on it.
Andy?
I was going to say something very similar to what Anne-Marie said, which is this idea of having people sign up and deliberately say, this is intentional. Here's the list of properties. So that would at least give you ahead of time from Bylaw's perspective. They know that, it's cross-referenced, if that's something that would work. And then that idea could be taken further with the signs. And the signs aren't just handed out to anyone who requests one, but possibly, again, Living Green, maybe the city, maybe Kelly's group, somebody goes out and kind of verifies it. Like, you get there and it's like, yes, this is not all just a lawn that has gone long, but it actually is an intentional one. Like, you almost have to sign up for it, but also a little bit of a verification process, so that, again, it's not garlic mustard or one of these other problems.
Mm-hmm. So I was kind of drafting a bit of a motion on the fly there to try to capture some of the discussion. So what I have now is that staff in Access Barrie, which is the communications arm of the city, and enforcement services investigate the creation of communication tools, including yard signage and online educational materials, to promote and designate natural gardens and to support residents participating in No Mow May, and report back to General Committee. So the idea was to capture both the signage part and the outreach part, and then also designation of those natural gardens and the No Mow May participants, so that we can track that. How do people feel about that sort of idea?
Without having it in front of me, maybe just in parentheses or something reference to the Boulevard Garden program, just so they have an idea of the concept, where there's some type of, informed awareness of what this means, and that they are formally aligning to it.
And Jason, I saw your hand there.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the maybe separating the natural gardens from the No Mow May, because we do have some regulations regarding those natural gardens already, versus the no mow May, which is not in there. You got to cut it down 6 inches or less, you know, so there are two different things, I think.
Okay. Andy?
I was just going to ask Jason, like, what, because the idea with the signs is to hopefully head off so you have less calls, right? Because that's, I mean, it's not just about like designated, it's just like saying this is now signaling to someone, I know what I'm doing. This is on purpose. So what would you find in your experience would decrease the amount of calls coming into the city? Because that's really, I would think, the most ideal thing is that you have less people complaining about something they didn't understand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not going to stop all the calls by any means. Yeah. So people just, you know, they don't understand, or they don't wish to understand. But anything that's going to assist, such as a little sign that shows that this is intentional, not just neglect, would certainly assist. I would hope anyway.
So sorry, just to clarify, you would like, though, the no mow May, take that away. Like if there was only one and one was a no mow May, I'm participating in this, versus a naturalized garden sign, or is it both? Because they are kind of different messaging, because as you said, you now suddenly on June 1st are going to get all the calls about the lawns instead.
Yeah, like no mow May being just a little blip in time versus the natural garden that they're going to have all year long. That's kind of why I said they need to be a separate item in the discussion. If there was something, I mean, people can put their own signage up on their own property, provided it's not advertising, that just says, you know, this is my natural garden and I know what I'm doing type thing. The no mow May only being for that 1 month, you know, again, especially being our busiest month for property standards calls, some sort of notification to that aspect would be great. Keeping those two ideas separate, though.
Okay. So I just one more point on that, and then I swear I'll shut up. So one of the nice things also about no mow May is that if we do get some signs and people are really saying, yeah, no, I'm deliberately not doing this, there is going to be some other spin-off benefits, because their grass will actually set deeper roots, and they won't have to use as much fertilizer, as much water. Like, there's a whole bunch of reasons that's going to actually benefit their manicured green lawn as well. That's going to have other spin-off benefits. I just wanted to put that in there as well as another reason to do this.
Kelly. Oh, you're on mute.
I agree to separate it. I think that makes sense, to have those two separate pieces. I also think this is a climate action item as well, that perhaps is, you know, I'm sure that Caitlin probably has a gazillion things on her plate, and I'm not sure what exactly her focus is, but this is definitely one of those items. I see Adam popped up there, that, you know, could potentially fall under that, because as Andy says, climate action is a great piece of this, by not using your 2-cycle gas-powered lawnmower to cut the grass and emit emissions, you know, as a very small example. And I think that would also be very beneficial. But also just knowing that Pollinate Barrie has every goal to help anybody who ever wants to change their lawn into a pollinator bed in their front lawns. And that's one of our goals as we grow, is to work with the city and work with the citizens and provide them with plants, training, and education to make that happen, so we don't get those calls for Jason.
Awesome. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left in the meeting, and so I've written a motion that I think captures the discussion, and I'll read it out now. So there's two pieces to it. So First, that staff in Access Barrie and enforcement services investigate the creation of communication tools, including yard signage and online educational materials to promote and designate natural gardens and boulevard gardens and report back to General Committee. So to support those existing programs. And then secondly, that staff and enforcement services investigate an amendment to the yard maintenance bylaw to allow for residents to participate in No Mow May, and that staff in Access Barrie investigate the creation of signage and communication tools to communicate the benefits of No Mow May and report back to General Committee. Any thoughts on that? We're liking it? Okay. Okay, can I get a mover? Anne-Marie, awesome. Any other discussion? I did see Jason, you unmuted for a second there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
I was just going to say, I think separating them like that, your wording works well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We appreciate your help on this. Anne-Marie?
So just a quick next step, because we are in June, and so it's not belabored. I know there's calling for agenda items for next general committee. So typically our actions would then roll up in the minutes and kind of get covered and pulled out, but I'm wondering about expediting this and submitting the motion we just approved to the clerk today, so it hits the agenda for Monday as an item for discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's, so instead of moving it now, just.
So I think still moving it now so we can point to the conversation that it was approved, but we're not waiting for the minutes to get caught in the list, and maybe just say in alignment to a motion. Yeah, are you good to send that into the clerk then, Keenan, for item for discussion?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, so any more discussion or questions? Brandy, I see you pop up.
Yeah, I was just going to say our clerk is not in the office today. However, if you wanted to forward your information to our deputy clerk, Megan Williams.
Will do. Okay, any more discussion or questions before we take a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Great, Laurel, yes, okay. And opposed, none, that carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for being here. We really appreciate your contribution to the discussion. And we're sorry you have to deal with so many complaints. Holy cow. Okay, next we have Future of City of Barrie events. Aaron Donnelly's here. We wanted to have a conversation with you about how we can better support residents in attending City of Barrie events using active transportation modes. Is this something that is already done through events promotion, or is there maybe some work that we can, our committee can support you with on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having us as part of the discussion today. As we talked about earlier, we have sort of two roles within the community. So one is presenting the City of Barrie's corporate events to the community that engage our citizens and promote tourism and engage our businesses and cultural organizations. And the other side of it is permitting. And so we work with a lot of the event organizers that also use city property to host their events. And so we have the ability to both look at ways that we can incorporate some ideas, and I love the idea about having a conversation, and for the sake of time too, you know, this conversation can continue offline as well, and we can continue to generate ideas of ways that we can look at supporting our own city initiatives, but also providing ideas for some of the organizers that we work with, just to give them some sort of best practices or suggestions as they're planning their events of things that they might want to consider. And there's so many benefits to promoting active and shared transportation and sustainability in events, because you know, as an offshoot, it even does things like alleviate some of the parking challenges downtown and on the waterfront, and those things as well. So right now, with a lot of the events, they take place in the waterfront and downtown, and so they have things like connection to the trails, bike racks in the parks, access to transit and some of those shared transportation modes. So it's maybe sometimes a matter of making that connection for people to say, like, when you're coming down to this event, think about how you could, you know, can your family hop on your bike? And where are the parking areas that you can access when you're down there? With transit, we we'll work on either doing sometimes shuttles when appropriate, or we'll do amended service when appropriate as well to help support access egress. A great example of that is on July 1st with fireworks, when there's a large amount of people coming down and leaving all at the same time for a very short animation. We work with transit to help hold some of the buses until the completion of the fireworks so that people can easily access transit and get home from the fireworks show. I'm, like I said, open to sort of answering any questions, discussion, idea generation for how we can better do this. And just a couple things that kind of got touched on in the course of this conversation as well. I think it was Andy that brought up some of the animations that or the activations that her group is doing at open air. And there's always opportunity within the existing framework of events for this committee, any of the organizations that are members of this committee or other organizations to pop up and have booths, activations at any city and other events, and we can help make that connection to some of the other event organizers as well. So if there was something specific that you were looking at getting involved in, we can help facilitate that. And then also organizing your own events too, and Bike the Night is a great example of that, an initiative that is coming up that will help promote that. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and open to more suggestions and ideas as well from this group. So over to you for any questions, feedback, ideas. And like I said, for the sake of time too, we can continue this conversation offline as well and continue to generate ideas.
That's awesome, Erin. Thank you so much. And I apologize that we sort of feel rushed here, but I think an offline conversation would be a great next step. Sherry, did you have a question or comment?
Just a question, Erin. Thank you very much for that information. This has been a topic of discussion that's been on the table for a long time. I'm wondering if with the permitting situation, whether or not, and I don't recall exactly what questions or stipulations are in the permitting, but is that something that you can add to that document in terms of encouraging the event organizer to consider ways that they are promoting or supporting active transportation as a sort of a suggestion or criteria for the event organizer?
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely something that we can do. We have two pieces. One is the permitting side of things, which is more of the requirements that you must do. You must submit this permit application or provide this information in order for that section to be approved. But there's also a guide that we have, and we need to do some updating on that, sort of coming out of the pandemic over the last couple of years as well. But it's a great resource for event organizers where we do provide some information about, things that they can think about when it comes to, say, greening their event or those kinds of things. But we can provide any ideas and suggestions there as well, and use it as a tool to help generate some ideas as they continue to think about how they can better plan their event.
Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. That was a great, Erin, just kind of tweaked in my brain. Is it perhaps we could put a policy in place when it comes to events and uses for green events? I'm not sure if that's an option, whether it's recyclables, one-use plastics, no-use plastics, using paper only. I'm wondering if we do have a policy, or is that something that we should implement?
Just speaking very briefly what my knowledge is, and probably more of a conversation to pull up some of the staff from the environmental team. But right now, what we encourage with event organizers is we provide garbage and recycling with those two streams. And we work through the environmental team and what their policies are to implement that at the event. So certainly something for conversation for future. And there's lots of great examples of events out there that have done some great work in this area. So it's definitely something to consider. Always the challenge with sort of the recommendation or the supporting of initiatives versus creating a policy is just being cognizant of a lot of the groups are small grassroots. And so anytime that there is something that is a requirement of them, it requires a lot of their efforts and resources, and may sometimes be a bit of a barrier too. So just kind of keeping that in mind is where is that finding that fine line of providing information and supports to help make those things possible, and creating, say, a city program that maybe helps support some of those initiatives as well. So definitely something for further conversation with the environmental team.
Laurel?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that link that we were sent. I don't think it made it on the agenda, but it was a transit and trucking tool, and that might be something that could be promoted as part of like an event organizer promoting transportation to an event. It was a link Brandy sent.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's right.
Maybe we can just add it to.
I'll try to dig that up, and yeah, we can definitely use that as a resource in this conversation. So perhaps as a next step, I can connect with you, Erin, and if any committee members want to be part of this conversation, maybe you can reach out to me, and we can continue the conversation about how to move this work forward. Sounds like there's lots of opportunity, and then we can kind of figure out if there's any additional resourcing that's needed, and we can talk about how we move that forward through council if needed. We're appreciative of your time, and just the start of this conversation. It's a big one, but yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Okay, so the next item is the transition document. So I think we'll leave the entire transition document to our summer meeting just because we're short on time. But and I'm so sorry, Adam and Caitlin, that we are running out of time here. But if you're still around, I don't know if both of you are still okay for time, and if the committee's okay, maybe we can just get a quick update from you guys about where the greenhouse gas reduction strategy is at. Welcome, Caitlin. It's so awesome that you're in that position since you're so familiar with the work already. It's really cool to see. So, if you want to take it away, and it's okay if we go past the time, I think, a bit, as long as you are okay to stay.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you for inviting me. There's a lot that's happening behind the scenes, and there was a lot in that document. So I think what I'll do is I'll give the close notes of the actions we're initiating, and it'll give people context of where we are. There are a number of immediate enabling actions that were identified in the plan, and this is focused on community greenhouse gas mitigation. So the first one was establishing a communication strategy internally with our group within the city to promote the plan and all the other actions that are relating to it. And you can already see the interactions with other sustainability initiatives that have a climate impact, like not mowing your lawn. So having the integration amongst the various things that are going on in the city and communicating that to look at emissions is one of the tasks. There are a number of big moves in the plan. The two main ones that cover 95% of the emissions of the community are transportation and buildings. So the first thing we're targeting on the transportation side is to look at and we haven't really finalized the scope, but more of a EV gap analysis or a deficit kind of investigation to see what EV availability looks like within the community. What are the barriers? What are some of the policies and things that can be undertaken by the city to promote EV uptake, and then encompassing all the other things, whether it be communications or working with the private sector and businesses to sharing that information. So we're working on the scope of that. So that's kind of a study, but that will help us to inform things that we should perhaps be doing in the future and not missing any things. It's interesting because Caitlin commuted in today on EV, and she had an interesting experience. So it is a very, I think it's well needed. We're also looking to establish a green development standard, so that targets the building sector, which is a large emission source within the building. That's initial stages. So we're doing the best practices review. What has everyone else done? Where are the successes? And also understanding that I believe there's a national building code that is trying to, I don't know what the right word is, but it's being deployed or investigated across the provinces, so you can standardize, and there'll be an opportunity there perhaps to align with that or any other new developments. And I understand there's a new mechanism for development charges that allow for a community benefit. So we're looking at integrating some of these things. So we've started that, and we're in initial stages. Another program within the building sector is a deep energy retrofit program. And we've actually, I was working concurrently as the plan is being developed to initiate this. And we've done, and this is a bit convoluted, I'll be very quick here, but we've done a characterization study. We partnered with the Clean Air Partnership and LightSpark, where they looked at all our residential houses and our stock and said, okay, here are the archetypes of houses, and here are the opportunities from a retrofit perspective. That is required as the first step to apply for FCM funding that would support the financing that would initiate a deep energy retrofit program. So there are a number of entities that have just done this. The City of Ottawa has gone through this pathway, and what we are waiting for is, we've done that first step. We're now looking at building out our program and understanding what the requirements are, and then we'll have to bring that to council to say, here, we need approval to apply for this FCM grant and this funding. Here's the proposed style of this program. And then once FCM goes through that process, if we get approved, then we move forward. So there's a number of steps there, and luckily we didn't have to pay for that study. We were able to partner with the Clean Air Partnership, so that was great. So we're hoping to move that through. The problem is the FCM process takes a long time, a grant application at minimum 6 months. So, and we also need to see what others have done, because we need internally to understand the resourcing requirement. But that grant will help support some of those resources in terms of staff, and also in terms of the financing that would go out to residents in terms of grants and that type of thing to support these retrofits. The other thing, the main thing on the community plan is then the action table development. So in order to initiate or to have some oversight with all of these actions that the city are taking or other entities are taking, we proposed action tables within the plan, and we're looking to establish not immediately, in the early set, the transportation and the building, and they'll serve, and you can already see some of the synergies, like if we have a green development standard or a deep energy retrofit program, that action table will serve as a good entity to engage stakeholders and provide review and comment on some of these programs that we're looking to submit from the community side or from the corporate side. But then also, if there's anything on the community side, there's a linkage there. So that's a real quick whirlwind of the community side. We're also developing a corporate net zero strategy, which we're looking to bring to council in 2023. So there's a lot of action in that process where we have to get our ducks in a row and understanding our emissions profile for the corporation and what we need to bring that to zero. So Caitlin's busy. Thank God she's here. And but it's amazing. It's really exciting, all the things we're doing. And I think we're overwhelmed right now because we have a load of things, but we do have a pathway of the things we're starting to tackle, and it's very exciting. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments on that barrage of information I just sent, but I'm open to those.
Any questions or comments from committee members? Thank you so much for that, Adam. It's exciting. Like it sounds like there's a lot that's actually, getting started so quickly after the plan was approved. It's cool to see. I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, Kelly, go ahead. Oh, there we go.
I always ask questions, you know that. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Welcome. I'm so excited, really excited about this. And I just want to make a comment. I really want to thank you for the last comment, which was the corporate net zero strategy, because I think that's really important as walking the talk and, really showing our mettle with the city as to what we're doing and how much of a commitment we're making. And just you probably need lots of money, and that'd be great. Maybe, I don't know, councillors, so let's give them more money so they can make this happen. That's all I have to say.
We'll try our best. Any other questions or comments?
Is there an opportune time to have you both back, and Caitlin even speaking more formally to your role at a future meeting?
Yes, I'm going to speak on Caitlin's behalf, but yes, of course. The virtual format makes it very simple to participate. It's less burdensome. Not that I don't mind meeting in person, but I think for us to, so please invite us, let us know what you're interested in. We can prepare, provide the details, and Caitlin can talk about all the work she's doing. I don't know if Caitlin, if you have anything to add.
No, but I'm happy to come back with something more prepared later on.
That's good. Even strategically to see what should fit into a recommendation for the next term of this committee's work.
Yeah. That'd be great. Have a conversation about how we can support the GHG reduction strategy as the advisory committee for sure.
And get you more money, Tilly said.
Yeah. I did have one question. Caitlin, does your role also include looking at the climate change adaptation strategy, or is it just on the mitigation and the GHG reduction side?
My role is just on the mitigation side, but we've already been chatting with the adaptation folk, and we're definitely going to keep in close contact and ensure that there's sort of, we're not just operating in silos, we're speaking to one another.
Okay, that's great.
One item just to jump in, corporately, we're looking at, and we haven't figured out fully, but to develop a climate lens mechanism where you evaluate your decisions and planning through that. And the lens has two, like brother and sister, is, you know, mitigation and adaptation. So we're not responsible for adaptation, but when we're doing those exercises, working hand in hand with the environmental sustainability and business performance branch, that will be good, because then they can, you know, we can, there are some synergies. They're not as much as you think, but there are some that you can co-plan and work through when you're working through project delivery.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Any other questions on this piece? I'm not seeing any. Thank you so much for your patience, Adam and Caitlin, and for giving us that whirlwind update. We so appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon about getting together again for a deeper conversation on this. Okay, so then we do have a Bike the Night update on the agenda. Is there anything burning that the Bike the Night working group would like to update the committee on?
I don't think there's anything burning. No, we're just working away. It's all coming together very nicely. So yes.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And Anne-Marie, I know you had an announcement you would like to make as well. So go ahead.
So very quick, it's an invitation to this committee. So on Wednesday the 15th, we will be doing a public unveiling of 2 sculptures going into the East Bayfield Community Park, so behind the community center. So it was part of my beautification efforts, but it aligns nicely to the mandate. So we've got the Martins, which are 2 artists locally that, and if Kevin is still on, Kevin Rankin and Stephanie and others, but Kevin really was part of the team with Kevin Bradley, who were instrumental in supporting logistics. So leveraging a green space around our parks, but and then Kevin Bradley also being part of negotiating all of those logistics with Stephanie and Carol Ann Ryan from the Public Arts Committee. And so what we've ended up with is on Wednesday the 15th. If you want to, I'll send it an update, but right now we're holding 9 till noon because I think they're being installed shortly, but the public unveiling will be of 2 sculptures that symbolize, you'll see monarchs incorporated into 2 different designs. And so they are related to climate action. And the intention is to soon have, I believe, the Terry Fox School or others engaged in outdoor education, and that this could become part of an integrated approach to some of the work that we're doing around city programming. So I'm not sure if Kevin, I don't think Kevin Bradley's still on the line, but I'm not sure, Kevin, if you want to speak to this at all, but I can send a document with more information discreetly through email.
I'll just thank you for all your involvement and helping make it happen. But definitely, you know, we're I think the forms are done and the sculptures are ready to be transported in place. The Martins did an amazing job on them, and exciting.
It's very exciting. So if any member of the committee, I would love representation from the committee there. Let me know if you're interested or available, and I can make sure that the timing is refined. But I also want to shout out to Kelly. So part of what also has happened is Kelly and Ashley with Pollinate Barrie are also working with Stephanie to actually plant and seed the area with native species. And so we've got a naturalized dedicated space in that park. So love to tour you through it if you're not familiar with it. But it is an area where planting is happening through the leadership of Kelly across different areas, but in particular is a nice complement to the installation of these two art pieces.
Sounds beautiful. I'm so excited. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I think with that we can adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and thank you to staff for all your support with this committee. We always appreciate it so much, and thank you for staying a bit longer this time around. I think it's the first time we've gone over our time as a committee, so I think it's allowed every now and then. But I'll be in touch with Brandy about setting up a summer meeting where we can start off with that transition conversation. And if there are any other agenda items we'd like to see for that summer meeting, then reach out to Brandy and myself and we can get those on. And yeah, we'll see you in either July or August.
Great.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.